Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk through some concepts and specific tools and approaches that we think are really powerful and specifically empowering to content authors and editors working with Drupal. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone can see this at this point. If you have, I think I've shared the wrong screen. Let me change that real quick. There we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. If you have any challenges seeing or hearing any of this content, do let us know. We definitely want to make sure that everyone can participate today. Today, we want to talk about flexible drag and drop authoring for Drupal, or more specifically, expressive authoring with structured content, two really important concepts. My name again is Justin Toupin. I'm the CEO here at Aten. I spend a lot of time working with our team, implementing some of the exact same solutions that we'll be talking about today. I am going to be joined here in a few minutes by James Nedick, who's a front-end developer here at Aten. James is just leaving a training with a large team of web editors and content managers at a prominent city here in Colorado, teaching some of the exact same concepts that we're going to be talking about today. Really excited to have him here. James is specifically going to be talking through some of the work we've been doing with Layout Builder, which I'm really excited for you all to see. Today, I want to talk a little bit about Drupal, structured content, and why structured content is important. I want to address the authoring experience problem that we have historically had in Drupal. I want to talk about some solutions that are built on top of Layout API, and really talk through Layout API as a framework for creating solutions to this problem. And finally, I want to show a couple specific examples. First, a contributor module called Layout Paragraphs that we've been doing a lot of work with. And second, the site building tool for managing layouts in Drupal core, Layout Builder. Really excited to dive into both of those. First, Drupal is and has been really good at structured content. But something that's been a little bit more challenging for Drupal in an area where other platforms have really led the way is in the authoring experience. And for years, we've heard from organizations who were thinking about what the appropriate content management system was for their users, think through the balance of structured content versus simplicity, and end up having to side with simplicity. And lots of organizations who end up choosing other platforms simply because their interface or their authoring experience is much simpler, much more elegant than the solution provided by Drupal. Today, we're going to talk about some of those same concepts or some of the ways that has changed in Drupal, and the fact that Drupal now brings some of these same powerful authoring tools to content editors. And again, we're going to show some specific examples of that. So let's start by just looking at structured content and again, addressing why structured content is important. So when we talk about structured content, what we mean is content that is organized in a predictable way. And having predictable content or structured content is really important for a handful of reasons. One, structured content is much easier to migrate. If you've ever migrated from a collection of HTML pages or a legacy content management system that is not structured, then you have firsthand experience with the challenges in migrating content that isn't structured. And again, having predictable content structures makes migration possible. Sensible workflows. We can create automated workflows when content is structured and predictable. Governance, so the ability to say who gets to edit what content and when. Again, something we can do when we have structured content. And then finally, structured content really supports and provides for this create once, publish everywhere methodology, where you push content into a system one time and it can be shared across an entire site, a collection of sites, other apps, again, migrated into other systems. Drupal has been doing structured content for a really long time. And it's a huge strength that Drupal brings to content editing teams. Drupal does this primarily in two ways, really simply, and this is a bit of a simplification, but via first content types and second fields. And we'll just review both of those really quickly before we dive into examples. So content types is basically organizing content into different predictable types. In this case, we have an exhibition or a destination for a collection of museums across Colorado. In this, down on the bottom left here, each destination or exhibition has hours of operation, price for admission, a title, location information specific to, again, a destination. Second, we have a blog post with a title, free-form content, and an author. Third, we have a person with a name and a job title and a biopic. Content types themselves are comprised of fields that are configurable and interchangeable. Just a quick example of fields on a specific page and what that looks like on the front end. Again, configuring fields, really developing these collections of fields is what allows us to break content into different types and have this very structured approach to content. Sometimes with more complex content, we need nested fields or structured components that, again, build up more complex content types. In Drupal, historically, this has been done with paragraphs and with a contributed module called, well, paragraphs, that allows us to think of content in these smaller chunks and these smaller collections of fields. So just a quick example might be literally a chunk of text that could be intermixed with a quote that itself has a caption, attribution, a link that might be intermixed with a piece of media with a caption, or a collection of media in the case of an image slideshow or other kind of gallery, each one with its own attached media and caption, etc. And we can start to see how these components build up these more complex pages with slideshows that are intermixed with content, with freeform text content, media, more text content, quotes, more media, etc. And Paragraphs gives authors the ability to develop this kind of content and also to rearrange the order of that content really easily. It's really powerful. And Drupal Paragraphs has offered both structure and flexibility for content editor teams, for web management teams. But not without challenges. One of the biggest ones being that Paragraphs has led to really complex interfaces. And along with that interface complexity, a rigid authoring experience. And finally, customizations to layout and to the way these paragraphs or components are displayed on a page. Even simple customizations can require code. Here's a quick look at the authoring experience or an edit form behind the kind of content that we were just looking at. Again, really complex, and it requires a lot from content editors. And it falls far short of what other systems are providing. And it is creating this very, it's serving this important need of providing structured content, but it's doing that at the expense of the kind of flexibility and simplicity that authors have really come to expect from web editing interfaces. That's changing as of Drupal 8 and beyond, and that's exactly what we want to dive into more today. I want to talk a little bit about Layout API as the technology framework that empowers some of the solutions we'll be looking at, that drives those solutions. The layout API in Drupal 8, 9, and presumably beyond is basically a system comprised of 3 parts. 1, a template with as many regions as the designer and developer imagines or desires. 2 is a front-end library with CSS and JavaScript that provides front-end behavior and front-end look and feel. And 3 is a layout plugin, which is the back-end piece of functionality that provides for back-end behavior or configurations. The layout API itself isn't the solution, but it provides a framework for building solutions and providing flexible authoring without sacrificing structured content, which again is just a really, really important concept. So we're going to dig into 2 specific examples. The first being layout paragraphs, then layout builder. So I'll talk through layout paragraphs and show some examples of how that works. And then I will turn this over to James and he'll talk through some of the work we've been doing with layout builder. So let's start with layout paragraphs. I'll just talk through what layout paragraphs is and what some of the pros for layout paragraphs are. So layout paragraphs is a contributor module that's built from the ground up specifically for managing paragraphs within content types. So if you're coming from a paragraph workflow, this works with what you already have. Paragraphs or layout paragraphs from a technical perspective is simply a field widget and field formatter that again works with existing paragraph fields. Layout paragraphs provides an improved authoring experience for paragraph fields. So even if you're not using layouts specifically, it provides an elegant drag and drop interface for managing or working with paragraphs. And finally, layout containers within layout paragraphs themselves are other paragraph types, which means everything within layout paragraphs can be managed at the field level. Fields that are again attached to paragraph types. And we'll look at this specifically, so hopefully that'll make more sense as we dive into a demo. I'm going to talk through just really quickly 2 of the drawbacks behind layout paragraphs. One is that you can't really create default layouts with layout paragraphs. So unlike layout builder, with layout paragraphs, you cannot set up a content type that already has a default layout and then make customizations to that. You're really kind of starting from the ground up every time you create new content. And with that in mind, layout paragraphs is an authoring tool, not really a site building tool. And then second, layout paragraphs is built from the ground up for paragraphs, and as such, its usefulness is limited to paragraphs. So it only works with paragraphs. It cannot be used to manage any other types of fields or content or blocks or anything like that. Everything has to be managed through paragraph types. Okay, so let's take a look at exactly how layout paragraphs works. So I'm going to use our website as an example. We're using layout paragraphs extensively across our entire site. So all of the landing pages, case studies that are on our site use layout paragraphs. This is a Drupal 8 site. We're logged in. We see all of the options that you would expect when logged into a Drupal site. I'm going to walk through the example of creating a new case study. Something that's very important for us as an agency is having a really flexible authoring tool for creating exactly the types of content that we desire, that we need in order to tell the story or to build a narrative of how we solved a particular problem or how we worked with a particular client. So I'll go to create new content, choose case study from the list, give my case study a title, choose the client. I'm going to skip these fields. These are used for populating lists or views wherever this case study might be displayed. Since this is just for demo purposes, I'll skip right over it. I talked before about workflow and governance. We use workflow for all content on our site, and each piece of content goes through a series of stages, starting with idea through published and archived. I'll leave this as idea today. And then one quick distinction. On our site, we've separated out the layout paragraph field into its own tab. You don't have to do that. That was a design choice for us. We just wanted to really isolate out the content of the page onto its own tab to make it really simple and also make it really closely resemble the front end. But there's no need to do that with layout paragraphs. In fact, most use cases would have this be a field intermixed with the other fields on your edit form. When you don't have any paragraphs attached to this content, you have one simple option, which is this plus button to add a new paragraph. We'll add a new section. When adding a new section, we see an option for all of the layouts that are enabled in the system. When you turn on Layout API in Drupal core, it comes with the Layout API itself comes with several predefined layouts that would be there available for you to use right out of the box. These are custom layouts that we have created for our site specifically. I'll choose a one column layout. After I hit save, you can immediately see that layout with a single region dropped into the page. I'm going to add a masthead, which is the most singularly purposed paragraph type that we have for case studies. So this is the one really sort of special, highly structured paragraph type. And I'll talk a little bit about that and about kind of baseline components and what layout paragraphs lets us do with those here in just a second. Give this a title and a subcaption, subhead. I'm going to choose some images from the media library. Of course, if these weren't already there, I could just upload them through the same interface. I'll place these into this masthead paragraph and hit save. And we can see that content immediately populates. So again, this drag and drop, very expressive, responsive interface. This is looking pretty good. I'm gonna make a couple of changes. I'd like to give this a background color that more closely resembles the content or works better with the content. We'll hit save, looking a lot better. I'd like, now since this background is dark, we really need to change the color scheme so that it's light on dark. We're using classy paragraphs to attach classes to these paragraphs. And again, since these are all just paragraphs types, what you're looking at are just fields attached to the paragraph. I'll choose this predefined class that we've created. Looking much better. Great. Let's add a second section. This time, we'll try a two-column layout. Hit save. Again, we have our layout container, a header region, left column, right column. We'll add some text into the left column. One thing that works really well with layout paragraphs is using these very simple building blocks for content. So in the past, we might have to have these fairly complex paragraphs that have, a paragraph that has text left, image right, or vice versa. With layout paragraphs, we can define these layouts and then push very simple, small components into them. And there's just a ton of flexibility that comes out of this system, even with a very small collection of paragraph types. So I add these two paragraphs into the left-hand column, looking pretty good. Everything is drag and drop with layout paragraphs, so we can easily move this paragraph over to the right-hand side. Again, I think a background color would help that look just a little bit better. Drop into formatting options. And there we go, looking much better. Great. I'll add just a couple more of these so you can see some of the other capabilities of layout paragraphs. We'll add another one column section. This time drop in a list of content. Just quick formatting with the WYSIWYG here. That's looking pretty good. Again, we have a specific style that we've defined to make these challenges and solutions text blocks look just a little bit better. Choose that custom style. And again, you can see that applied right here without having to browse away or hit save or preview or anything like that. And finally, let's add a section. It's a little bit more complexity. We'll do a 2-column layout again. Add a header in the header region. Add some text in the left column. And then do the same in the right column. Then let's add a slideshow. This is using Media Library. We'll just quickly, again, look for our Media Matters images and attach these 4. And again, as soon as we save this content, it drops in the component, more or less exactly how it would look on the front end. Again, I think this would look a little bit better with a different background color, so we can quickly edit the paragraph. Back in here, give it a dark blue background color. And change the color scheme. That's looking much better. I talked earlier briefly about layout plugins. And I'll show just quickly how those work. Layout plugin options show down at the bottom here. And this is a custom plugin that we've created for our layouts. It provides a collection of options. The one that we use the most is this stacking order, which is typically by default left columns on top, but we can change that to be right columns on top. And that entirely determines how content stacks when the screen is reduced in size for other devices. And I'll show how that works here in just a second. So we'll choose 2-column. And again, we'll give this a background color. This time I'll add a quote on the left. Shows up with this, again, this style applied to quotes. I'll add a video on the right. Great. There we have our layout once again. Let's take a look at how this collapses for mobile. Oh, that's not going to work actually. My minimize buttons are missing, so I'll save this content and come back to it. This is after having saved the content. Again, it's in the idea state, and we can see what we're looking at on the front end looks more or less exactly like what we were looking at in the back end while we were editing that piece of content. Just go back into this edit tab. Collapse this content down so we can see how the stacking order works. If I scroll down to the bottom of the screen, we can see our left-hand column, this one, bumps up above the right-hand column, which is the typical stacking order for content on our site. But again, we can change that by just going into the layout, under layout configuration, changing right columns on top, and it reverses the way that stacks. So that's how that works. That's about everything I have to show for how Layout Paragraphs works for creating content. Let's just briefly take a look at the settings for the actual content type. So again, you all can see how this works from a site building perspective. So if we go into content types, look at case studies, manage fields, The content field is an entity reference revision field, exactly like paragraph fields. In fact, it is just a paragraph field. We go to manage form display. As I talked about before, we've isolated out that content field into its own view mode. So that's why it's on this tab. Typically, it would be listed just with all the other fields. Again, that was just a choice we made, a design choice we made for how we wanted to edit content, not something you would be required to do at all. When we look at the different options for the widget, we have the typical paragraph display options or form options, and we now have this new option, layout paragraphs, because that module has been enabled. When that is selected, we have a few options specific to layout paragraphs. We can choose what view mode we want to render each paragraph using on the edit screen. So if we want to set up a custom view mode for paragraphs so that they look slightly differently, or one use case for this would be to strip out forms. If there's a form embedded inside your paragraph, that can cause problems when editing content. So you can create a custom view mode and choose to use that view mode for your content. And again, just in the editing interface. Maximum nesting depth. So one feature with layout paragraphs is you can nest layouts within layouts. You can go up to 10 levels deep. I'm not sure anyone would ever need to go up to 10 levels deep, but you can. In this case, I've just selected 0. So you cannot, when you select 0, you cannot nest layouts, but that is an option provided with layout paragraphs. And also, layout paragraphs allows managing of content and creating paragraphs outside of a layout. So if we unchecked require paragraphs to be added inside a layout, we could actually intermix paragraphs outside of the layout containers, just for added flexibility. And if we bounce over to manage display options, to get this to work on the front end, all you have to do again is choose the layout paragraphs formatter from display options. And that's it. That's how that works. So that again is everything I had to show with respect to layout paragraphs. Let me go back to this slide deck. And I'll turn this over to James, who can talk through Layout Builder. Okay. Great. So again, that's everything with layout paragraphs that we wanted to show. Happy to address any questions. Just send those over in the chat. We can take questions here at the end. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about Layout Builder. So before I turn this over to James, just a few quick pros and explanation of exactly what Layout Builder is. So Layout Builder, of course, is the really incredible new site building and layout management tool in Drupal core. Layout Builder overrides or customizes content view modes. So where layout paragraphs works with paragraph fields, Layout Builder customizes or overrides view modes. And James will show us exactly what that means here in a minute. Layout Builder does allow creating default layouts, which again will make more sense here in a moment. But you can create default layouts for content types and then override those layouts on a per node or per piece of content basis. And then finally, Layout Builder can be used to manage virtually all types of content, all content entities within your Drupal system. So fields, blocks, views, other content, really anything can be placed using Layout Builder. A couple of the drawbacks related to so those pros. First, the interface can be rather complex because there are so many options. Related to interface complexity, options can be overwhelming, making governance a little more difficult. And layout customizations do require code, which is the same for layout paragraphs. Creating new layout behavior requires custom code. And again, because Layout Builder is so powerful and can place anything with Layout Builder, you may end up needing to do more work in the templating system to get things to look exactly how you want. So let's turn this over to James and walk through a specific example of how Layout Builder works.
Thanks. So I will go ahead and now share my screen and show you some of the work we've been doing with the client of ours, Stanford Summer Session. So this I thought made an interesting example because we've actually built this website years ago prior to the release of Layout Builder into Drupal. And it was built in a way that was pretty, the content was flexible, but the content authoring and the placement of things was a lot more static. And so one of the asks was to allow for a lot more customizations around how the page, around how they could lay out the page or how they could place content on pages, especially a lot of their landing pages, which needed more flexibility. So one of the challenges there was rolling out a system that wouldn't break the already existing content and also wouldn't require them to have to go through the existing content and recreate it into the new system. So it kind of needed to be seamlessly introduced to the current website. So if we look at, say, under admission and we look at the eligibility requirements page, we can see that there's a header image, there's the main copy here off to the left, and then there's some promotions. And this was sort of the formula. You could go into this page and click edit, excuse me, and you'd be presented with, you know, your fairly standard Drupal form where you have the edit tab to add the image. You could update the text, or you could add those promos or add some testimonials, but you couldn't really control how those things were placed. You couldn't change anything about the layout, or you couldn't introduce new types of content easily into the sidebar, not without it being a developer change. So one of the things that we did was we introduced Layout Builder, and like Justin had mentioned, we leveraged the default layout section. So once you enable Layout Builder under content types, and for this site, we've just enabled this on the basic page layout currently, and then might expand this out to other content types. But if we go to Manage Display, and then go to the full content display, normally, if you look at any other content, any other view mode, you see what you're used to seeing in a Drupal experience where you can sort of drag fields into view and then place them in your template. But if you go to full content, and now that we have Layout Builder enabled, this changes. We don't see that table of draggable fields. Instead, we see the option to use Layout Builder and then to also optionally allow for each content to have its layout customized. And this is what Justin was saying earlier about you can establish defaults and then optionally allow for individual pages to be overridden. And that's what this checkbox does. We have a module that is, I think, really helpful for managing some of the governance complications that Justin was talking about, called Layout Builder Restrictions. And this allows us, for this content type, for this view mode, to control which blocks are allowed to be placed, which fields from this content type are allowed to be placed. So you can kind of see this literally includes everything and the kitchen sink. So we just wanted the content, the image, files, promotions. So we wanted to control access to that. And then also we wanted to control which layouts are available. Again, saying maybe only certain layouts can be allowed on certain content types. So this helps with that governance. But then if we click this Manage Layout button, we're dropped into the authoring experience, which then mimics the front-end theme. And this is where we are establishing sort of the global default. Anytime you would go in and create a new page, this is how it's going to look out of the box. And so we see an image, we see our content here off to the left, we see promotion off to the right, and then a testimonial down at the bottom. And actually, if we click this Show Content Preview checkbox, we get a little bit more of a condensed view, so you can actually see what's being added. This is that header image field being added to this region. This is the content field, the private file field. We're putting the promotions field over here off to the left, or excuse me, to the right, and then testimonials down here in a new section. And then one of the nice things that we could then do for every page on the website is change this default and say, you know, we actually also want an image to go here. And images, this isn't going to be part of that main content. This isn't going to be part of something that's editable per page through the initial content form. This is just a persistent element we want to make sure is always there. And so we can go ahead and select an image, and we'll go ahead and pick this image here, select that. We can pick through any of the view modes that are enabled for this image. So in our case, we'll want card because it has the crops that we want. And now this image block will always exist on the page above the promotions, whether or not we've added any promotions. So it's a nice way to kind of, like Justin was mentioning earlier, intermix some of those non-content type fields or content that was usually a little bit trickier to inject into our templates before. And now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and then save our global layout. But let's say we now want to create a new piece of content. So we can go under content, add content, and we'll add a basic page. Give it a title. We will give it our image. We'll actually pick this LinkedIn image that we saw earlier. We'll go ahead and give us just some text to work with. Since it is the lunch hour for me, I'll go and grab some cupcake Ipsum, which is, I think, fun to use and feels relevant to how I'm currently feeling. So we'll add that. I'll go ahead and add some existing promotions. And we'll add an existing testimonial. And then save that. And the nice thing about this experience is it does kind of allow us to create sort of an interesting authoring tier depending on how you want permissions set up. So this could be set up in a way where there's some users on the website who only have the ability to control content, but not necessarily layout. And we can kind of separate those two things so they can always go in and make sure they edit what they need. There's that persistent block that we've added. Here's our promotions, our content, and then there's our testimonial down at the bottom. But now let's say we want somebody to be able to come in and then override this piece of content, not all of them, but just this one, and insert a couple of the things that maybe didn't exist but need to. So we can click on the layout tab, and this is added when you enable Layout Builder. And this is the same screen we were just looking at. So now we can go ahead and enable that show content preview. So we can kind of get a more representative experience as to what we're adding. And we'll just say that we needed to add a tweet here. So we can do that. We'll pick one of the tweets that I have available on my local demo. And again, like before, we can pick any available view modes. In this case, we'll leave this as the default. And now we have that tweet. And then let's say we also want to add just a little grid of images down at the bottom below the testimonials. So we can go ahead and do that. We'll add a new section. We'll add a grid layout. And then we can just quickly add some blocks here. And in this case, we just want 3 images. So I'll add those. We'll go to the second page. We'll grab a couple images. Make sure it's also set as a card. And then once that's done, we kind of see things look relatively how we want them to. Maybe we want this tweet to actually live at the top. So what we can do is grab it and drag it above the testimonials. And then scroll to the top and click Save Layout. And now all of the changes that we've added have been placed onto this page, but it only exists for this page. And again, this could live outside of the main content section. So Depending on a user's permission, they can only edit, the testimonial and things, but they can't remove any of these more persistent elements. So the flexibility on how you set up and how you manage that governance is entirely up to you. But I think that's about all I have for the layout builder demo. I think I'll turn things back over to Justin.
Great, thanks, James. Get back to sharing my screen, just wrap this up. Okay, great. So again, that's everything we had to show for both layout paragraphs and layout builder. Just a few quick resources. You can, just a short link to download layout paragraphs if you go to aten.io/LP. You can also just go directly to drupal.org where that redirects, just drupal.org/project/layout paragraphs. We have a couple of blog posts that are, again, covering some of the same subjects we've talked about here. And then I think we'll be sending out resources via email to everyone who's joined today. So again, thanks everybody. All stuff that we're really excited about and really happy to be working on here. I think at this point, and I'll stop sharing my screen and kick this back over to Joe. Thanks.